Nanda sat gracefully on the windowsill of the small, weather-beaten cottage, her sleek black fur shimmering in the soft moonlight. A striking white patch adorned her chest, stretching up to her delicate chin and culminating in a tiny spot just under her lower lip. Her front paws wore pristine white ankle socks, and long white stockings graced her back legs, creating a beautiful contrast with the rest of her midnight-colored coat. Just past her bum was a unique, shorter than usual tail with a hook on the end. Oh, that hook! As a tiny kitten, she had once caught it on a window frame, flipping upside down and screaming loudly until she was rescued swiftly. It had shaken her up for sure. Thank God Mummy was home. Below this sweet, sweet girl, the world slumbered, but her sharp gaze scanned the night, a silent guardian watching over her domain. Outside, a thick fog curled around the cobblestones, enveloping the outside village in a damp, heavy stillness. Earlier rain had left the air cool, carrying the scent of wet earth and wood smoke. But now everything was too quiet, too still, once filled with Grace's gentle humming and the crackle of the hearth fire. The house had fallen silent, as if holding its breath. Nanda swished her tail, her pretty emerald eyes squinting as she surveyed the night. She knew every rooftop, every narrow alley, and every creaky door in this little village. It was a predictable place, suffocatingly so, but tonight felt different. A subtle shift in the air alerted her to something unnameable, a sense of unease. Grace's sudden departure hadn't made sense. There had been no warning, no goodbye. One day, she was there, just like always, preparing tea, muttering about her books, scratching Nanda's ears in passing, and the next day, gone. Nanda, with all of her fierce feline independence, could have left any time. The door had been left ajar, the outside world calling to her with its open skies, fresh scents and whispers of adventure. She had even heard of a nearby market teeming with the promise of fish, chicken, and irresistible treats, a haven for curious cats like her. Yet each time she considered it, something kept her here. It wasn't just loyalty, though, that played its part. It was a deeper feeling, like an invisible tether, pulling her back to this house. Grace had left something behind, unfinished business that Nanda could feel in her very bones. The answers she needed were here, not out there. The vibrant energy that once filled the space had dimmed, leaving Nanda in silence, punctuated only by the occasional creaks of the old wooden floors. She wondered how they creaked, for her tiny body couldn't have made that noise. Could it be ghosts? No, ghosts don't have weight, surely. The air still held Grace's scent, a mix of black cherry and vanilla pods, lingering in the fabric of the sofa, in the quilts folded on the armchair, quilts lovingly stitched by Grace's own hands, alongside the religious paraphernalia scattered about. At night, she would curl up on Grace's side of the bed, where the warmth still lingered, and the familiar scent wrapped around her like a comforting blanket, offering solace in the quiet darkness. She dreamed of adventures in distant places, always hoping to wake up and find Grace by her side. Nanda was no ordinary cat, and she knew it. There was something about Grace, too, something beyond her gentle eccentricity and whimsical stories. There had always been a deeper purpose behind Grace's routines, her quiet rituals. Nanda had sensed it long before Grace's disappearance. Grace had been searching, always preparing. For what? Nanda wasn't sure. But now, more than ever, she felt it. The sense that Grace's absence was temporary, that something was about to happen. The photographs on the walls, framed moments of Grace's life, watched Nanda with frozen smiles, much like those at the end of the Titanic movie. Those nights curled up together, Grace's voice lulling them both to sleep, were now memories locked inside the quiet house. Nanda often found herself staring at the door, half expecting it to creak open and for Grace to reappear, smiling as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Nanda's little murder mittens tapped lightly against the windowsill as she stared out into the fog-cloaked night. She felt it in her bones that something was coming. Grace had left, but not without reason. Nanda was sure of that now. Something in the house still connected her to Grace, whispering in the quiet moments. Leaving wasn't an option until she figured out what it was. She often watched the world outside from this window. The distant laughter of children or the bark of a passing dog sent a pang of longing through her heart. Life had moved on without her, leaving her trapped in a moment of stillness, like a statue among the living. The fog was thicker tonight, the air charged with tension. Something was shifting. She could feel it. Maybe tonight, she thought, as her claws flexed against the wood. Maybe tonight, I'll find out what's going on. Her independence, once a badge of pride, now felt like a responsibility. She wasn't just a cat lounging in a house. She was waiting, watching, for Grace, or for whatever Grace had been preparing for. Her ears twitched at the slightest disturbance, but no sound broke the stillness, except for the distant hoot of a barn owl, its call mournful. Nanda sighed and rested her chin on her front paws. So, this is what it's come to, she moused, her thoughts as dry as leaves in late autumn. A life of staring out of the window at fog and wishing to talk to someone who doesn't hoot or snore. Well done, Nanda. You've really made it. Once, this place had felt warm and alive, thanks to Grace's gentle magic, a kind of magic Nanda had never fully understood, but had come to value. Now, without Grace, that magic had evaporated, leaving only dust and shadows, and hundreds of yellow knitted woolly chicks that Grace would make every Easter for the local charity sale. The absence of laughter, of the crackling fire as Grace read her beloved books, left a void that echoed through the empty rooms. The books still sat in untidy stacks, but they felt hollow, as if the words inside had been silenced along with their reader. Nanda jumped from the windowsill, blinked slowly, then began scanning the worn floorboards. Empty house, empty life. She used to joke with Grace about being just a cat, but now that the house was silent, the humor felt hollow. Grace, with all her quirks, had been Nanda's only companion. Now all that remained was this. I should have left ages ago, Nanda muttered, her voice low and mournful. She had never been one for grand displays of emotion. Cats, after all, were supposed to be inscrutable, aloof. But tonight, alone with her thoughts, Nanda found herself restless. Her claws flexed against the windowsill. But where would I go? She added bitterly. Somewhere, anywhere. Maybe somewhere the fog isn't so clingy. I could find new books to sit next to, at least. She watched the stars beyond, their cold light barely cutting through the thick veil of night. Her sharp mind, ever alert even in stillness, began to stir. What was it that made her feel so stuck? The answer always came back the same. Something about this place kept her tethered here. Something she couldn't quite name. Something beyond the familiar comforts of home. She had always thought herself too sensible for dreams of distant lands and grand adventures. That sort of foolishness was for kittens, not for her, not for Nanda. Then again, she thought with a wry smile, Grace always said I wasn't your average house cat, didn't she? But the truth was simpler. It wasn't that she couldn't leave, it was that she didn't know what she was waiting for. Maybe it was the quiet, maybe the routine, maybe, deep inside, it was fear. What would I even do? Go paragliding? Learn to read? Nanda snorted, amusement creeping in. She pictured herself soaring from the peak of some colossal stone structure, glaring down at a sea of bewildered faces. Not my style, she giggled. I'd rather keep my paws firmly on the ground. Her gaze drifted to the sky again, and she caught sight of something. A flicker of movement. A brief shimmer slicing through the dense clouds. Nanda sat up, her sharp eyes locking onto the brilliant streak now blazing across the heavens. A shooting star. She had heard Grace's stories about shooting stars, how they were infused with magic, capable of granting wishes if you asked just right. Nanda had always dismissed it as fanciful nonsense. But in this moment, watching that fiery trail illuminate the darkness, she felt an unexpected stir of longing, a whisper of possibility that made her heart race. Come on, Nanda. A wish? Really? She muttered, incredulous at her own thoughts. You're not that desperate. But the star continued its path, burning a hole in the sky. Her eyes followed it, and deep inside, something stirred, a small, insistent voice. She had buried long ago. What if I did wish for something? She murmured, the words slipping out before she could stop them. She could almost hear Grace's voice in her mind, chuckling softly. You never know unless you ask, dear. Wishes are funny like that. She stared at the star, a sigh escaping her. Fine, she grumbled, if that's how it works. She closed her eyes, feeling ridiculous even as the words left her. I wish I could be anywhere but here. Something more than this. Something bigger. She paused, then added, and if there's adventure involved, so be it. There was a long silence, the star long gone, swallowed by the night. Nanda cracked one eye open, scanning the room. Of course nothing happens, she muttered. Why did I think? Suddenly the air shifted. It grew warmer, heavier. A soft glow began to fill the room, faint at first, but steadily growing brighter. Nanda's fur stood on end. Her eyes snapped wide open, her muscles tensed, and she leapt from the windowsill to the floor, landing gracefully, but ready for anything. What in the? Nanda whispered, her eyes darting to the source of the light. It wasn't moonlight. No, this glow was different. It came from within the room itself. Slowly, cautiously, she padded toward the corner where the light was brightest. Her sharp eyes fixed on something small, floating just above the floor, a pendant, spinning lazily in midair. Well, is that not at all ominous? She uttered quizzically. She slowly approached, her mind racing. Am I hallucinating? Did I finally lose it after all these quiet nights? The pendant was unlike anything she'd ever seen, golden and intricately carved, radiating a soft, almost otherworldly light. At its center was a deep blue gemstone, the color of a calm ocean beneath the night sky. The heart of the ocean? No, it wasn't that. The shape was all wrong, but it was a lovely blue nonetheless. Nanda tilted her head. Now, where did you come from? She reached out a tentative paw, her instinct screaming at her to be cautious. But that innate curiosity got the better of her. The moment her paw touched the pendant, the world exploded into light. She was no longer in the room. Everything spun, twisted, pulling her in every direction. There was no ground, no sky, no walls. Only the sensation of being hurled through space, faster than she could comprehend. She tried to yowl, but the sound was swallowed by the chaotic whirlwind of colors and light surrounding her. What in the name of? Her voice caught in her throat as the chaos intensified, a deafening roar filling her ears. She was tumbling, spinning, completely out of control, yet somewhere deep inside, a tiny voice whispered that she was safe, that this was right. She didn't know how long the storm of light and sound lasted. Seconds? Hours? Just as suddenly as it began, however, it stopped. The world snapped back into focus, and Nanda landed on her feet with a soft thud, her paws landing onto something warm and solid. She blinked, dazed, and tried to take in her surroundings. She was no longer in the house. The sun beat down fiercely, the air hot and humid. Nanda squinted against the brightness, her eyes adjusting to the harsh light. Around her, towering stone buildings rose, their surfaces worn, and in places etched with carvings. People bustled through the streets, their skin golden under the relentless sun, their robes light and flowing. Her mouth fell open in shock. No, she breathed. This can't be real. But it was real. It was as real as the warm breeze rustling through her fur, carrying the scent of a nearby river. Just as real as the first towering temple that she spotted in the distance, its stone pillars stretching toward the brilliant sky. I'm in ancient Egypt, she whispered, barely audible. For the first time in her life, Nanda was speechless. There were no sarcastic quips, no biting comments waiting on the tip of her tongue. The sheer weight of where she was, of what had just happened, pressed on her like the relentless heat of the Egyptian sun. After a moment's hesitation, she took a step forward, her paws brushing against the smooth stone beneath her. Her sharp eyes darted from side to side, taking in the impossible. Temples loomed in the distance, grand and imposing, while the streets bustled with life, humans and animals moving in a rhythm that felt both ancient and unbreakable. This isn't suburbia, she muttered, taking in the sprawling city. This has to be a dream. Even as she spoke, her rational mind fought back. She'd felt the weight of the pendant, the pull of the light. And now, here she was, in a time that shouldn't exist. She glanced down at her paws, then at the people walking past her, oblivious to the tiny tuxie cat standing among them. Yep, completely normal. Nothing strange about a modern-day cat in ancient Egypt, she whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. She sat for a moment, her mind racing, trying to make sense of it all. Why Egypt? Why here? More importantly, how? The pendant, the wish. It was ridiculous, absurd, but she'd asked for it, hadn't she? Something bigger, something more, an adventure. Well, Nanda, she said aloud, a smirk curling her lips, you definitely got your wish. This is way bigger than fog and cobblestones. She paused, her thoughts drifting. Wow, fog and cobblestones. That'd make a great goth album title. As she sat there, trying to process her new reality, a shadow fell over her. Nanda's eyes snapped up, meeting a pair of sandaled feet, attached to long tanned legs wrapped in linen. Nearby, another figure strolled into view, wearing long white socks that clashed comically with his sandals, pulled up just below the knees. Nanda couldn't help but stifle a laugh at the absurd sight. Shaking her head at the bizarre combination, she looked up and found herself staring into the curious eyes of a young woman. The woman's dark eyes were lined with kohl, and her skin was glowing and olive. She wore a soft expression of amusement, but a flicker of curiosity danced in her eyes as she crouched down to get a better look at Nanda. "Well, aren't you a peculiar little thing?" the woman said softly, her voice carrying the lilting cadence of Egyptian. To Nanda's surprise, the words sank into her mind as if she'd always known them. Nanda slow blinked, thoughtfully considering her options. She could run, dart into an alley and figure it all out later. But something in the woman's eyes held her in place. They gave a sense of calm, of familiarity. As if fate itself had a twisted sense of humor, Nanda decided to do the unthinkable. She responded. "Peculiar?" Nanda said, her voice sharp, even as her mind screamed at her to stop. "You're calling me peculiar while that guy over there is rocking sandals and long white socks in this heat?" The woman's eyes widened in shock, her mouth falling open. You speak?" Nanda twitched her whiskers, suppressing the urge to roll her eyes. "Clearly." The woman's expression changed from surprise to delight, and she sat down on the sand. Her curiosity piqued. "A talking cat," she said with a breathless laugh. "The gods must have sent you." Nanda snorted, her green eyes narrowing slightly. "I wouldn't go that far. If the gods had anything to do with this, they have a strange sense of humor." The woman shook her head, a broad smile spreading across her face. No, you must be a gift from Bastet, the goddess of cats." She clapped her hands together, her eyes lighting up. "This is a sign. A most wonderful sign." Nanda blinked. Bastet? The name tugged at something in her memory. Grace had mentioned Bastet more than once, in her many stories about ancient Egypt, a feline goddess, protector of home and family, with powers beyond comprehension. "I'm sure that's flattering," Nanda replied, trying to keep her voice even. "But I'm just a cat. Let's not get carried away." The woman's eyes sparkled with excitement, her hands trembling slightly. "I am Safi," she said, still beaming, "a humble servant in the temple of Mahat. And you? What is your name, divine one?" "Nanda," the cat said cautiously, still unsure about the whole divine one business. "Just Nanda is fine, though. I'm not particularly into titles, although my human mum used to sometimes call me Princess Nu. Safi seemed to ignore her last comment, still caught up in the idea that Nanda was some sort of sacred being. "Nanda," she repeated reverently. "A beautiful name." Nanda tilted her head, sizing Safi up. She didn't seem dangerous, just overly excited. But Nanda had learned long ago that appearances could be deceiving. Still, there was something about Safi's earnestness that made Nanda's fur settle a little. "So, Safi," Nanda began, her tone thoughtful, "what exactly happens next? Do I get paraded around as some divine messenger, or is there a more subtle way to navigate this place?" Safi chuckled softly, her laughter like the sound of wind rustling through papyrus. "Oh, no parades. But I must take you to the starting point of your journey to the temple of Mahat. There is someone of great importance who simply must meet with you." She stood up, brushing sand from her robes. "She will know what to do." Nanda raised an eyebrow. "And if I don't want to go?" Safi looked down at Nanda, her smile softening into something more understanding. "You are free to do as you wish, Nanda. I will not force you, but the temple is a place of great power. Perhaps you were brought here for a reason. Maybe you will find the answers you seek there." Nanda pondered this, the hook end of her tail tapping softly against the stone floor. Something about the situation gnawed at her curiosity. If she was truly stuck here, if this was indeed ancient Egypt, then she might as well explore where this strange new path would lead. Visiting the Temple of Mahat sounded more interesting than wandering aimlessly through the city. "All right," Nanda said, sighing as though this were just another minor inconvenience. I'll go with you. But let's make one thing clear. I'm not anyone's messenger. I'm just a cat who got caught up in something bigger than she bargained for. Safi nodded solemnly, the corners of her mouth twitching in amusement. Of course, Nanda. You're just a cat. Nanda gave her a sidelong glance. But there was no malice in Safi's words. Only warmth. The woman began walking. And after a moment, Nanda padded along beside her, her sharp eyes taking in the world around them. Nanda's mind buzzed with questions. She had wished for an adventure, and it seemed like she was getting one. What kind of adventure? What had brought her here? What did it mean? Well, Nanda thought to herself, at least this isn't boring.